My mother only ever loved my older sister, Claire. It was clear from the beginning. Claire was the golden child, and I was merely an afterthought. From the time I was old enough to recognize patterns, I noticed how she treated us differently. Claire's laughter echoed through our home, and my mother, Lillian, would proudly showcase Claire's accomplishments, as if she were a prized possession. Lillian only seemed to notice me when there was something to fix or complain about, usually regarding how I wasn't enough like my sister. Claire was vibrant, brilliant, a whirlwind of energy and charm. She filled rooms with her confidence and quickly drew people to her, winning trophies and accolades that graced our family's walls. Mom glowed in her presence, her words thick with pride whenever Claire achieved anything. I, on the other hand, had always been more quiet, reserved. I preferred reading and found comfort in silence, qualities that seemed to irritate my mother more than anything. For her, everything I was never measured up. Early memories blurred into a kind of recurring disappointment as I realized that my accomplishments would never matter to her the way Claire's did. I still remember the day I got my first A in a subject that had always been difficult for me, math. With excitement, I showed my report card to my mother, who glanced at it briefly and muttered something about how my sister had never struggled like that in school. She handed the card back to me as if it were meaningless. That moment set the tone for the rest of my childhood. High school felt like a battleground, my sister's reputation shadowing every corner. Teachers, friends, family members, they all saw me as Claire's little sister, someone who, by default, fell short of the perfection Claire embodied. Claire was popular, vivacious, and effortlessly connected with people. I was quieter, hesitant around new people, and found my strength in academics and art, which I hid because I knew my mother wouldn't understand or cared. Then there was my father, Edward, who always seemed absent. When he wasn't working late, he was at Claire's games, events, or meetings. He never said much to me and rarely offered encouragement. I accepted it, not expecting anything better, and threw myself into my studies, hoping one day I'd get away, find my own place, my own life, somewhere else. It was the only way I could escape the feeling of invisibility that suffocated me in that house. When I graduated from high school, I was accepted to a university out of state. For the first time, I felt like there was a way out. The idea of starting fresh somewhere far from my mother's disapproval was thrilling. But when I announced my acceptance at dinner one night, my mother barely looked up from her plate. Her only response was, "I suppose someone needs to leave this house eventually." There was no congratulations, no acknowledgement of the hard work I'd put in to get there. Claire had chosen to stay closer to home, pursuing a local degree in business, which my mother praised as responsible and loyal to family. Despite the lack of encouragement, I left for college determined to carve out a new path. University life was a breath of fresh air. I was just myself, no longer Claire's little sister or the quiet one. My roommate, Sophie, was a warm, easygoing person who quickly became my first real friend. We shared everything, from late-night study sessions to dreams about the future. She treated me as an equal, making me feel seen in ways my family never had. I thrived in my classes, pouring myself into every assignment and making friends who appreciated me for who I was. I found confidence in my passions, especially writing. For the first time, I allowed myself to embrace my own interests without fearing criticism or comparison. I wrote about things that mattered to me, things that had gone unsaid for years. My writing became my voice, a way to finally express myself after years of feeling overlooked. 2 years into university, I met someone who would change my life forever, Daniel. He was studying architecture, and we met in a shared elective class. His warmth, intelligence, and gentle humor made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. We started spending time together outside of class, first as friends, then as something more. Daniel valued me, saw my worth, and helped me realize I didn't need to seek validation from anyone else, least of all my family. As my relationship with Daniel deepened, so did my conviction to build a life separate from the one my family expected. I returned home only occasionally, brief visits where I felt like a stranger in my own house. Claire continued to bask in my mother's praise, their bond as strong as ever, while my achievements were either ignored or brushed aside. One Christmas, during one of these rare visits, my mother made an unexpected announcement. Claire was engaged, and they were planning a lavish wedding. My mother's face was radiant with pride as she described the plans, while I sat quietly, unnoticed at the edge of the table. It stung, but by this point, I'd become numb to her favoritism. After years of disappointment, I no longer expected anything different. A few months after the wedding, I received a call from Claire. She and her husband wanted to start a family, but she had recently discovered that she couldn't carry a child herself. They wanted me to consider becoming their surrogate. My heart sank as I listened to her pitch, one that was well rehearsed and clearly supported by my mother. We just thought, since your family, you want to help, for us. I tried to explain that I wasn't comfortable with the idea, that I had my own life and dreams. But my refusal only fueled their insistence. My mother was livid, accusing me of selfishness, saying I was tearing the family apart. After everything we've done for you, you're really going to deny Claire this one thing? Their guilt tripping was relentless. For weeks, I received calls and messages from both my mother and sister, all with the same agenda. My mother even threatened to cut me off if I didn't comply. This wasn't love, it was manipulation, plain and simple. The final straw came when my father, who had been largely silent throughout my life, called me out of the blue to tell me how disappointed he was in me. In that moment, something within me snapped. I realized that I didn't owe them anything, least of all control over my own body. I was done letting them define my worth, done being the scapegoat for my mother's conditional love. I told them all, in no uncertain terms, that I would no longer be in contact. Then I blocked their numbers, cutting the ties that had bound me in silence and pain for so long. From that moment forward, I focused on building my own life. Daniel and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by friends who were my chosen family. We moved into a modest home, and a few years later, we welcomed a daughter, Emma. With her, I vowed to break the cycle of indifference and conditional love that had defined my childhood. She would know every day that she was loved, valued, and seen. Through therapy and self-reflection, I learned to accept that my family's treatment of me wasn't my fault. It was their choice, and they had to live with it, not me. I focused on my writing career, finding success and sharing stories that resonated with others who had felt invisible. My past had shaped me, yes, but it did not define me. I had broken free. Looking back, I can finally see that the love and respect I'd longed for had been within me all along. I had just needed the courage to recognize it and to live a life that reflected my true worth. The family I have now is one built on love, respect, and the understanding that everyone deserves to be valued for who they are, not for what they can give.